Hi everyone, this is my other book, The Secret of Freedom by Marcia Vaughn. I was 10 years old the first time I went to stay with my great Aunt Lucy. We'd shoot crows from the field, cool our feet in the river, then sit in the kitchen chit-chatting like a pair of summer sparrows. I remember one day when we were shelling peas into a chipped blue bowl while the curtains billowed in the breeze beside us. Suddenly, my gaze caught a splash of color on the wall. "Aunt Lucy," I said, "why do you keep that old scrap of cloth hanging over there?" Aunt Lucy split open a pod and chased the peas out with her thumb. "Child," she said, "that's a story I haven't told in a long, long time. When I was about your age, I was a slave, property of folks named Briggs down in South Carolina. Seeing as I was born with a lame leg, the overseer said I was no good for field work. So I got sent to scrub clothes out in the hot sun till my hands were raw and my back ached like an old plow mule's. From where I worked, I'd look out across the plantation trying to find Papa stooped over in the cotton fields. Sometimes I'd snatch a glance up at the big house, where Mama was a seamstress. Though I couldn't see my brother, Albert, I'd hear the clang bang of his hammer as he worked at the blacksmith's anvil. Times were full of trouble. War was coming, sure. Folks up north talking about putting an end to slavery. Folks down south bound to keep it. Long about that time, the overseer came to our quarters. "Bessie, Thomas," he said, "slave traders taking you to the auction block today." "What about Albert and Lucy?" Papa asked. "They stay in here," the overseer snapped. "Just you two getting sold off." Saddest thing I ever saw was my parents being led off to that wagon. Knew I'd never see Mama smile, or hear Papa's laugh again. "Master, he buy us, sell us, beat us, work us till we died. Oh, how I wish things could be different." Albert felt same as me, and he came up with a plan. Whenever he was loaned out to work at another plantation, he'd find out all he could about the Underground Railroad. One time, he came home with a burlap sack slung over his shoulder. "Lucy," he said, "I got the secret to freedom inside this sack. Blacksmith over at the Mobley plantation gave it to me." Albert's eyes danced as he emptied the sack out on the table. "What you got here, Albert," I said, "is a bunch of raggle-taggle old quilts." Albert chuckled. "No, Lucy, these quilts are special. Blacksmith told me each one has a secret message stitched right into it. Slaves who understand these messages have a better chance of escaping to freedom up north." "What kind of secret messages?" I asked. "Messages that tell us folks what to do. When they see the quilt with the monkey wrench pattern, it tells folks to collect the tools they'll need when they run away," Albert explained. "When folks see the one called the wagon wheel, it tells them time's come to pack their belongings. This quilt with the bear paws says to follow the bear tracks north through the mountains." A wave of excitement washed over me. I was beginning to understand. "Is this one important?" I asked, pointing to a quilt with tumbling blocks. "It's the most important," Albert replied. "Tumbling blocks tells folks it's time to run." Then Albert's eyes got real serious. "You want to help slaves escape, Lucy?" he asked. "Of course I do. When the time's right, I'll tell you to hang a certain quilt on the fence by the road," Albert said. "Be sure you hang out the right one. Folks' lives be dependent on you. But what if Master Briggs sees it? Master, mistress, even the overseer won't pay no mind to some old slave quilt," Albert said. "But slaves planning to escape will know what the messages mean." "How they'll know?" I asked. "'Cause I'll tell 'em." That brother of mine was wily as a fox and brave as a bull. Things worked out just like Albert said. When he told me, I'd hang the monkey wrench quilt on the fence. Later in the week, I'd hang out the wagon wheel quilt. A few days after that, the bear paw one. Then, after I'd hang out the tumbling blocks quilt. Albert would steal away quiet as a cat during the night. He'd meet the runaways at the graveyard and lead them to a hiding place down by the river where they'd begin their journey to freedom. One night, I remember, the moon was riding low in the sky. Patrollers caught Albert coming back late without a pass. "Time to teach you a lesson, boy," they said. Those men tied Albert to a tree and lashed him hard until blood ran down his back. After that, the overseer took a mean dislike to Albert, whipped him raw for no reason. But those whippings couldn't beat the spirit out of my brother. "Albert," I said one night as I rubbed grease into his wounds, "you got to run." Albert shook his head. "I ain't running, Lucy. I won't leave you." "You got to go, Albert. The overseer just waiting for a chance to beat the life out of you." Albert rose up to his feet. "Then we'll both go," he said. "You know I can't move no faster than a snail," I argued. "I go, and the patrollers catch us sure." Albert's face was stubborn. Then I'll carry you, Lucy, all the way to freedom. No, Albert, you got to go without me, I said. War be comin' soon. If the North wins, the slaves will be free. Albert held me in his arms and hugged me hard. Be a long time before I see you again, Lucy, he whispered. Tears had as wash water flooded my eyes. I reached into my pocket. Take this with you, Albert, I said. It's a quilt square I stitched with the North Star in it. It'll bring you luck. Before I could say goodbye, he disappeared into the darkness. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Lightning flashed silver across the sky. I knew it was lightning the way for Albert. Then all was still. Suddenly the silence was shattered by the sound of old Butler barking as he charged off into the night. There was the crack of gunfire and angry shouts. Patrollers! Lord, I could barely breathe. I wanted to call out to Albert, but I couldn't. Couldn't do nothing except clutch my quilt tight and pray to keep from screaming. I had a horrible feeling I'd never see Albert again. Never knew if he got away that night or died trying, but my heart thundered like a drum to think maybe he was on his way to freedom. War came. Slavery died a slow death. Life was still hard, but I knew I wanted to learn to read and write and teach others to do the same. Took a heap of time learning all those letters and how to string them into words. I was all grown up by the time I started my own school in a brush arbor by the river. Didn't matter their age. Anybody wanted to learn, I'd teach them. One specifically hard-working pupil was a fellow named Chester. Every time he looked up at me, he'd get a grin wide as the watery river across his face. A year later, we got married. Chester worked as a sharecropper. I scrubbed clothes for a pittance and kept teaching for the love of it. One afternoon, the mailman came knocking at the door. Reckon this letter's been trying to find you for a long time, he said, handing me a rumpled brown envelope. Curious as a cat, I ripped it open. Out fell an old scrap of fabric with a single star stitch on it. Heavens above, it's from Albert, I cried. He made it. After all those years, I near burst with joy knowing my brother was still alive. What's Albert got to say? Chester asked. My eyes raced across the paper. He's living up in Port Hope, Canada. Says if this letter ever finds me, he wants to bring his family to visit. Oh, Chester, I'm going to see my Albert. I'm going to hold him in my arms and hug him hard. Oh my, did we ever have a celebration when Albert and his family came to town? In all my years, that's the happiest thing that's ever happened to me. Great Aunt Lucy smiled as she took that old kilt square off the wall and held it in her hands, and she carried it to the table and let me hold it too. Now I do declare, child, your eyes sparkle just like Albert's did all those years ago, she said. Then we sat in happy silence, shelling peas into the bowl while the curtains billowed in the breeze beside us.